My dad disgusts me. Just like that, he said it, thinking I was asleep. He said it from the next room, his voice low but clear, like someone venting with rage and no remorse. And I just stayed silent. I didn't say anything, not even a sigh. I just squeezed my eyes shut. It hurt more than any sickness, more than any blow life had ever dealt me before. Because that disgust, it came from my own son. My name is Elias. I'm 78 years old. And this story you're about to hear isn't pretty, but it's true. I was born in a rural part of Ohio. I worked with my hands in the dirt since I was a boy, and I became a man, pushing wheelbarrows of cement when I was barely 14. After a lot of hard work, I managed to start a small construction supply company, which over the years became something respectable. Nothing fancy, but it allowed me to raise my 2 children, send them to private school, give them a house food, and I even took them on vacations to places I never dreamed of visiting as a kid. I was their father and mother, because their mom left early on, leaving me with a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. I never complained, not once, because they were my engine, my faith. I cooked, I washed, I took them to the doctor, to school, to soccer practice, to the school plays. I worked from sunup to sundown, and still I managed to read them a story before bed, and I did it with joy. Not because I had to, but because I loved them with everything I had. And now, almost 40 years later, to hear him say that my dad disgusts me. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling like a ghost, my heart shrunken, my mind repeating those words like a malignant echo. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh at how foolish I'd been so blind, because now it all made sense. The impatient glances, the sighs when I spoke, the sarcastic comments at family dinners. I just didn't want to see it. I clung to the image of that little boy who used to hug me with his short arms, his hands full of mud, who would tell me, "Daddy, don't go," every time I left for work. But that boy didn't exist anymore. What was left was a cold, ungrateful, and cruel man. The next day I got up as always. I made coffee, put bread on the table, and waited for him to come out of his room. When I saw him, he greeted me with that same old face, as if nothing had happened. "How did you sleep, Dad?" "Fine, son, just fine." And I offered him coffee without a hint of resentment in my voice, because I already knew what I had to do. Not right at that moment, but something inside me broke, or rather something awakened. Throughout the day, his words wouldn't leave my head. I looked at myself in the mirror and asked, "Is that me a burden? A nuisance, an old man who causes disgust?" I remembered all the times I didn't buy myself clothes to pay for a course for him. All the times I slept in the living room when he came over with his wife so they could have their privacy. I remembered the day I signed over the title of a car to his name without asking for anything in return. And the time I got him out of a debt with the IRS by selling part of my land. All of that, all of it, was in my heart, like deep footprints. And still, now I disgust him. I didn't say anything, not that afternoon, not that night. I went to sleep in silence again, but this time I didn't feel defeated. I felt calm, like someone who finally accepts a truth. And when you accept, you act, but without drama, without shouting, without slamming doors. Because when a father realizes his son no longer loves him, you don't beg for love, you gather your dignity, you lower your head, you put your pride in your pocket, and you leave. I'm not going to tell you what I did just yet, but I assure you, one thing: I didn't stay there. I didn't wait for him to change. I didn't go looking for comfort. I didn't go asking for explanations. I just observed and took a mental note. On the 3rd day, while he was working from the dining room on his laptop, I passed by and heard him talking on the phone with someone. "My dad is still here, yeah? Same as always. Old slow. I don't know. I don't want to live with him anymore. It's like having a piece of old furniture in the house, but one that breathes. And he let out a laugh, a low, mocking laugh. I went out to the garden. I sat alone. I looked at the house, that big, beautiful house I built with so much effort. That house was in my name, all of it valued at over $1.5 million. Yes, all mine. And then a deep silence washed over me. Not of sadness, no. It was a silence of certainty, as if a voice inside me said, "Elias, it's time." That night I opened a drawer in the wardrobe. I took out a blue pen and an old piece of paper that had been folded in there for years. And I started to write something. Something he would never forget. But more on that later. Comment below. If you had heard that from your own son, what would you have done? And tell me too, from what corner of the world are you listening? Because this story is just getting started. I didn't write a long letter, no. I didn't even use fancy words. I just wrote what was necessary. A few lines clear, direct, like everything in my life. I left it neatly folded, tucked inside a yellow envelope I had kept for years, along with other important papers. I placed it on my desk. And I continued with the rest of the plan, without rushing, without anxiety. Because when you have been humiliated that way, there is no urgency, there is only decision. Before that, I walked through every corner of the house. Not to cry, not to remember, but to look with different eyes, with the eyes of someone who no longer belongs. I walked down the long hallway I built with my own hands when I still hadn't finished paying off the loan. I touched the door of my daughter's room, the one I painted pink when she turned 15, and I stopped in front of the portrait of my late wife in the dining room. I spoke to her in a low voice. I said, "I'm sorry I didn't see sooner who our son was becoming." And then I went to the bank. I had an appointment with my financial advisor, a very proper young man with whom I had spoken before. He knew I didn't have many expenses, that I lived off my pension and some rental income. But what no one knew was that I had a fund saved up, an account in dollars that I started building many years ago just in case, because every cautious man knows that the just in case always arrives. That day I withdrew the amount I needed to do what I had to do, without moving much, without raising suspicion. In the afternoon, I went to talk to the same real estate agency that helped me buy the house 30 years ago. An older gentleman who still remembered me attended to me. "Elias, what a pleasure to see you. What brings you here?" "I want to sell my house as soon as possible." He looked at me with surprise. He asked if I was sure. I said yes, that I wanted discretion, and I made it clear. The property was in my name, no debts, no mortgage, no legal complications. Everything clean. Any special reason he asked? Only one. I want to disappear. He didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded his head. While the paperwork started moving, I continued my life as if nothing was wrong. Samuel thought I was still the same. I cooked, watered the plants, answered him politely. But I wasn't the same. There was an invisible distance between us, a distance he couldn't see. But I felt it like a wall. One night he brought some friends over for dinner. They laughed, drank beer, played music. I didn't say anything. I locked myself in my room. But I could hear his voice again. "My dad doesn't have a clue. He's old now. He's in his own world." And another one replied, "But he lives like a king, huh? This house is a palace." And he burst out laughing. "Sure, as long as he's alive. Let him enjoy it. It'll be mine after." It was right there at that moment that I knew my decision was correct. A few days passed, and the sale progressed quickly. The buyer was from out of state. He wanted to pay in cash. He was in a hurry, just like me. Everything aligned as if life itself was saying, "That's enough, Elias. Get out of there." The night before the closing, I slept little. Not because of doubts, but because of emotion. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was relief. It was as if a stone was finally being lifted from my soul. The next morning, I signed the papers. I sold the house for $1.5 million. The money was deposited into a new account at another bank with another name as the legal beneficiary. Mine. But with a reinforced privacy code. No one could trace anything. I had it all planned. Everything clean. I returned to the house, which from that moment on was no longer mine. Samuel hadn't come back from work yet. I had time. So I went up to the room, packed my suitcase, my usual one, the green canvas one. I packed enough clothes, my documents, my father's watch, a couple of old photos, and of course the envelope with the note. I left it on the dining room table with a rock on top so it wouldn't fly away. And I left. I didn't take a taxi. I walked to the corner. I took a bus downtown. From there, straight to the airport. I had already bought the ticket 3 days ago. A one-way ticket. No return. No notice. No goodbyes. And as the plane took off, I felt peace. A strange, silent peace, the kind you only know after a great deal of pain. Samuel arrived that night and called me. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. He left me a message. "Dad, where are you? Why aren't you home?" Minutes later, another message. "What does this mean? You sold the house, are you crazy?" And finally one more. Shorter, harsher. "What did you do, old man?" I didn't answer any of them. And the only thing he found was the note I left him on the table. The same one I wrote with a firm hand, without a tremor. "The one who disgusts you is gone." And he took everything with him. You don't have to be ashamed anymore. Now learn to live without him. Goodbye, son. Because there comes a time when silence is not cowardice. It's justice. And the best was yet to come. Because he thought everything was his. But he had no idea what was still on its way. I never thought that at my age I would be starting over from scratch. But it's also true that I never imagined my own son would push me to this point. The plane landed in Denver at 9 at night. No one knew I was there. No one was waiting for me. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I had booked a simple room in a modest motel downtown. Nothing fancy, but enough to spend a few weeks while I decided my next move. I checked in with a compound name using my 2 last names and paid in advance with cash. I didn't want to leave a trail. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want anyone coming to look for me. Especially not him, because I knew him. I knew that sooner or later Samuel would react. Not out of love, not out of concern, out of self-interest. That same night, as I lay on the hard motel bed, I checked my old cell phone and saw more than 20 missed calls. All from him. More texts. More voicemails. Some pleading. Others furious. One even insulting me. "How could you do something so stupid? What am I going to do now? Where are you, you old idiot?" I turned off the phone. I wrapped it in a cloth and left it inside my suitcase. I wasn't going to answer. I wasn't going to give him explanations, because I didn't have to anymore. I had spent my whole life giving him what was never asked of me. My father was strict, tough, silent. He never hugged me. He never told me I love you. But he taught me to have integrity, to be honest, to stand by my word, to not sell my dignity for affection. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be a warmer, more present father, but I was wrong. I confused love with overprotection, kindness with weakness, and he got used to a father who was always there, who always said yes, who never demanded anything, until he felt entitled to despise me. The first few days in the new city were strange. I would wake up early as always and go for a walk through the streets without a destination. I watched people pass by the street vendors, the children coming out of school, and I thought, how many of them were also abandoned by their children? How many old men like me are out there walking alone with broken hearts, pretending it doesn't hurt? I'd buy a coffee from a corner stand. I'd sit in the downtown square and watch life go on as if nothing had happened, as if my story didn't matter. But I knew it mattered. Maybe not to the world, but to me. One afternoon, I met an older man, Mr. Robert, who also lived at the motel. We sat down to talk. He asked if I had family, and I answered that I once did. He looked at me in silence and then said, "Some things are lost and are no longer worth looking for." He was right. I told him a little of what I had been through without giving names or details, just enough. And he told me, "You did the right thing, old man. No one has the right to treat you like trash, not even a son, especially not a son." I slept more peacefully that night. Meanwhile, I found out from the lady at the motel that there was a small cozy house for rent on the outskirts of town. I went to see it. It was surrounded by trees with a small garden in front and an old hammock hanging between two wooden pillars. I liked it. It reminded me of the times when my children were little, when they would hang hammocks between the trees in the yard and play pushing each other until they almost touched the sky. I rented the house for 6 months, also paid in cash. I bought simple furniture, a television, a stove, a comfortable armchair, and a light wood table, and I settled in. Just like that, silently, without telling anyone, I started over, at 78 years old. But of course, the story wasn't going to end there. One day, while I was walking through the market, my old cell phone, which I had kept stored away, started ringing. I had only turned it on to handle a bank transaction. And there it was. The message. A formal email written by a lawyer. My son Samuel was notifying me of an intent to contest the sale, claiming I was not in full possession of my mental faculties at the time of selling the house. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. He wanted to claim I was senile, that I was losing my mind, that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't get angry, I didn't despair. I just took a deep breath. And I smiled, because I had already foreseen all of this. Before the sale, I had asked my doctor for a complete certificate signed and sealed stating that I was in full lucid health, both physically and mentally. I had also made a video recording with the notary explaining that the sale was voluntary, conscious, and without any kind of pressure. And as if that weren't enough, I had drafted an additional document stating that I was doing it by personal decision for private family reasons that I did not wish to share publicly. Everything filed, everything notarized. So I called the lawyer from the email. I introduced myself as Elias, and I told him calmly, "Tell Samuel to forget it. He's not going to get a single dollar from that house. And if he keeps insisting, I will present evidence that will make him look ridiculous in front of the judge." There was no response for several days, until a new message arrived. This time it was a voicemail from Samuel. His voice sounded different, tired, desperate. "Dad, I didn't know you had done all that. I didn't think you would really leave like that. I was just angry, okay? I didn't mean to say that. The thing about disgust, it was stupid. I'm sorry. Come back, please come back. Don't leave me alone." I didn't reply. I turned off the phone. I poured myself a coffee. I went out to the patio. I sat in the hammock. And for the first time in many years, I felt that I owed no one anything. Because there is no worse abandonment than that which comes from a son who still lives under your roof, and yet treats you as if you were invisible. And I was no longer willing to live like that. No more. Never again. I hadn't planned on hearing from him again. After all, what more could he say to me? I had already heard it all. And what hurts the most is not when they yell at you in anger, but when they despise you in a low voice thinking you can't hear them. The thing about disgust, it wasn't just a word. It was a sentence. And when a son sentences you like that, there's no going back. However, life has its own twists, and sometimes someone who has already resigned themselves to closing a chapter receives an unexpected call. This time it wasn't him. It was his sister, my daughter Monica. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I had just returned from the market with freshly baked bread and some tomatoes to make my soup. I answered without looking at the number. Dad. Her voice. I recognized it instantly, and I was quiet for a few seconds. Dad. Are you there? Yes, sweetheart. I'm here. There was silence on the other end, a silence full of pent-up emotions. It was hard to find you, she said with a broken voice. No one knew where you were. Samuel didn't want to say anything. He just told us you had sold the house and disappeared. And what did he tell you about why I did it? He said you had a crisis, that you weren't well anymore. I chuckled softly. Of course, that sounds very convenient. Dad. I didn't know anything about what happened. I swear. But I suspected because he hasn't been the same for a while. I asked her to speak calmly without rushing. I told her my version without embellishments, without exaggerations. I told her about I discussed him, the plan, the sale, the note. She cried. Not out of surprise, but out of sorrow. I always knew something wasn't right. She confessed. Samuel changed a lot. He became arrogant, cold. He used you, Dad. And I saw it. But I was afraid to speak up. He told me not to get involved, that you knew what you were doing. And I knew it, sweetheart. I just didn't want to see it. Because as a father, you always hope that love will be stronger than ingratitude. But it's not always the case. She asked to see me. She said she needed to hug me, that she had things to tell me, that her son, my grandson, was asking about me all the time. I hesitated because I still had that distrust stuck in me, that fear that it was all part of a game by Samuel. But something in her voice convinced me. I always felt Monica was more sensitive, more fair. And after all, not all children are the same. A week later, she arrived at my new house. I saw her get out of the taxi with her eyes full of tears, carrying a bag of pastries and a box of old photos. We hugged for a long time. We cried without saying anything. Just that hug. It said everything we hadn't said to each other in years. We spent hours talking. She told me things that left me stunned. That Samuel had tried to get into my old house after the sale. That he caused a scene with the new owner. That he had gone to the family to say that I had abandoned him. That I was sick. That he even tried to pull strings to have the sale declared invalid. But no one believed him. Because the papers were in order, and because in the end time puts everyone in their place. Monica asked me if I planned to go back. I told her no. That this new life, though more modest, gave me something I had lost years ago. Peace. That I didn't miss the noise or the TV at full volume or the sarcastic comments during dinner. That I preferred the sound of birds in the morning and the silence at night. She looked at me with a tenderness that broke me. "Dad, can I come more often?" "Always, sweetheart. This door will always be open for you." That afternoon when she left, I sat in the hammock with a cup of coffee. I watched the sunset and I thought, how many men like me have had to start over after a lifetime of giving? How many fathers are discarded as if they were old furniture? Society applauds us when we work and provide. But when we get old, it wants us to be quiet. And when a son says, "My dad disgusts me," what he's really saying is that he's no use to me anymore. But that's where you have to respond. Not with hatred, not with screams, but with dignity, with firm steps, with decisions that teach without the need for words. And that lesson Samuel was beginning to understand, damaged by his own echo, because the things said in a low voice sometimes reverberate for a lifetime, and my life was just starting to find the right volume. After that visit from Monica, the days started to have a different flavor. It wasn't happiness, no. I'm not exaggerating. But it was like a gentle calm, like when it stops raining after weeks, and you can finally see the sky without clouds. She would come to see me every Saturday afternoon. She brought food made with her own hands. She helped me with things around the house, swept the patio. She listened to me without interrupting. And the most beautiful thing of all, she brought my grandson Ethan, a boy of just 8 years, who with one look gave me back something I thought was lost. Sincere tenderness. The first time Ethan came, he approached me shyly with a ball in his hand and said, "Are you my Grandpa Elias?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, son, I am. And why didn't you live with us?" "Mom said you were on a trip." I looked at him carefully. I chose my words. "Sometimes adults also need to find their place, son. Is this your place now?" "I think so." "Do you like it?" He nodded, and without another word hugged me tightly. No explanations, no judgments. That hug was the medicine my soul needed. As the weeks went by, my life took on a new routine. On Mondays, I cleaned the house. On Tuesdays, I went to the market. On Wednesdays, I walked in the park with Mr. Robert. On Thursdays, I wrote in a notebook where I started to record my memories. On Fridays, I cooked something special. And on Saturdays, I waited for Monica and Ethan with open arms. Never on Sundays. She could never make it. She said Samuel always demanded her presence on that day. Ironic, isn't it? Now he was demanding attention after having turned his back on me as if I were an old dog. But don't think he stood still. No, his ego wouldn't allow it. After the legal route closed for him, because he couldn't contest the sale or claim my incapacity thanks to the documents I left signed, he looked for ways to smear me through other means. He called distant relatives saying I had left him on the street, that I had gone crazy, that I needed help. Some wrote to me with a concerned tone, others with judgment hidden in sweet words. But I didn't respond to any of them, because at that point I no longer owed explanations. I was no longer going to beg for understanding. One day, a letter arrived handwritten with no return address. I recognized it instantly. Samuel's handwriting. It was brief, cold. It said, "I don't know what you gained from all this. You only managed to split the family apart. You took from me what was mine by right. I hope you're satisfied. I hold no grudge against you, but time will put things in their place. Goodbye, Dad." I read the letter 3 times. Not out of emotion, but out of disbelief. Nowhere did it say sorry. In no line was there a hint of self-criticism. Not a question, not a show of humility. Nothing. Just wounded pride and manipulation disguised as courtesy. I burned the letter in the patio, without anger, just for emotional hygiene. And on that very day, as the ashes flew with the wind, I sat in the hammock with the notebook on my lap and wrote something I never thought would come from my hand. Sometimes to heal, you have to break the mirror and stop looking for the reflection that never existed. I didn't lose my son. I lost the illusion that he was someone he was not. That sentence stayed with me. It was like a key to open many internal doors, and every door that opened freed me from a guilt I had placed on my own shoulders. Because yes, there were days when I wondered if I failed as a father, if I was too soft, if I should have set boundaries sooner. But then I told myself, no. You are not guilty of loving. It's not your fault if the one who received your love didn't know what to do with it. The following month, I was invited to a small gathering at the neighborhood cultural center. Mr. Robert had signed me up without asking. It was a meeting for seniors where they shared life experiences, played chess, told anecdotes. At first I didn't want to go, but he insisted, and I went. I met men and women with stories that left me speechless. A lady who was abandoned by her 5 children. A man who found out he had been declared dead so they could collect his pension. A grandmother who raised her grandchildren as her own and was then kicked out by her daughter-in-law. And yet there they were, smiling alive, telling their stories like someone watering a plant so that others may flourish. They invited me to speak, and I spoke with a clear voice with a firm chest. I sold my house and disappeared because I heard my son say that I disgust him, and I didn't leave out of pride. I left out of self-respect because I understood that if I didn't defend myself, no one would, and that a father's love should not be used as an excuse for a son's abuse. There was silence, then applause, and a lady hugged me on my way out with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Elias. You said what many of us feel and don't dare to say. That night I walked home with a light heart, looking at the starry sky, as if for the first time, because I understood something fundamental. My story was not unique, and although that hurt, it also made me feel less alone. I was not an isolated case. I was part of a generation that gave everything, and in many cases was forgotten. But I was also part of a new wave, a wave of late dignity, of silent justice, of fathers and mothers who said enough. When I arrived, I found a note from Monica under the door. It said that Ethan had drawn something for me. It was a sheet with crayons, him and me sitting in a hammock, drinking coffee. Below, written in a child's handwriting, it said, "My grandpa isn't sad anymore." And it was true. Maybe I still had wounds, but sadness not anymore, because I had finally become the owner of my own life again, and I didn't plan on letting it go ever again. I was never a man of luxury. I never needed to have the newest car or the most expensive shoes. My greatest wealth was always in seeing my children grow up with dignity, with hot food on the table and a roof that didn't leak. That was enough for me. But when you reach a certain age, you realize there are things that can't be bought with all the money in the world. Respect, gratitude, the sincere look of a son, and the quiet silence of a guilt-free night. That peace, I had finally found it in that simple little house in Denver, surrounded by people who didn't judge me, who owed me nothing, and therefore didn't use me either. Monica came more and more often, and Ethan already knew my routine. He knew that on Tuesdays I made noodle soup, that on Thursdays I cleaned the yard, and that on Saturdays I had some lemon cookies saved for him that he loved. We laughed a lot, played cards. He told me about school, about his friends, about how they called him the wise man's grandson when he talked about me. And that filled me with pride, because even though Samuel had turned his back on me, Ethan restored my faith. One Friday afternoon, Monica arrived more serious than usual. She sat in the kitchen while I made coffee and lowered her voice. "Dad, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to get angry." "Tell me, sweetheart." "Samuel is not doing well, not at all." I stood still with the spoon in my hand. In what way? He was fired from his job. It seems he was having problems with several colleagues, and there was an audit where they found strange transactions. He denies everything, but things don't look good. He's desperate. I didn't say anything. I just served her the coffee and sat down across from her. And what do you think I should do? Nothing, Dad. I just wanted you to know. He didn't ask me to come. He doesn't even know I'm here, but I think he's hitting rock bottom. And you know how he is. When he feels cornered, he attacks. Do you think he'll come looking for me? I don't know. But if he does, I want you to be prepared. I nodded in silence. I had already imagined something like this. Samuel had always had that mix of pride and desperation that made him dangerous when things didn't go his way. He thought the world owed him something, as if everything he had was by right and not by someone else's effort. And me, I was no longer willing to support him. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat in the armchair on the patio under the stars and thought about life, about how you give everything for your children, and sometimes you end up running from them, about how love is not enough if there is no respect, and about how as much as it hurts, you have to accept that not all children deserve the same place in your heart. Some earn it, others lose it. 2 days later, what Monica feared happened. It was 6 in the afternoon. I had just returned from downtown where I had gone to buy some nails to fix a loose board on the porch. As I turned the corner, I saw him. Samuel. Sitting on the curb, his face buried in his hands. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, and that twisted expression of someone who has no more excuses. He looked at me. He stood up. Dad? I didn't say anything. I kept walking towards the door. He followed me. Dad, please just listen to me. Listen to what another speech about how I owe you something. No, not this time. Then speak. He stood there taking a deep breath. His eyes were red. I was wrong, I know. I said things I shouldn't have, things I didn't even feel. But I was angry, frustrated. With me, with myself, but I took it out on you. You said I disgust you, remember that? Yes. And tell me, Samuel, what do you do with a father who disgusts you? Do you ask him for help when everything goes wrong? He looked down. He didn't answer. What do you want now? Nothing. I just wanted to tell you that if you ever decide to talk to me again, I'll be here. I won't bother you anymore, I swear. He looked at me one last time and left. He walked slowly, dragging his feet like someone who has nowhere else to go. I went into the house, closed the door. I leaned against it and took a deep breath. I didn't cry. I didn't feel pity. I just felt that I wasn't the same anymore, that that man Samuel no longer had power over me. Not his words, not his misfortunes, not his guilt. Because I had already freed myself. And when you free yourself, there is nothing and no one that can chain you again. That night, I wrote another sentence in my notebook, one that I want Ethan to read someday. Forgiveness is not always about going back. Sometimes forgiving is to keep walking, but on a different path far from the one who hurt you. And with that, I slept peacefully. Because sometimes justice is not punishment. It's simply distance. And I was finally far from everything that had hurt me. I never imagined that the greatest distance was not measured in miles, but in respect. Because now that I think about it, Samuel and I could have been in the same house under the same roof, eating at the same table. But we lived in different worlds. He ever more full of anger, of contempt, of a superiority I don't know where he got. And I ever more silent, swallowing the pain, so as not to break the little that was left between us. But that silence ended. Not when he yelled at me, not when he ignored me, but that night when he uttered that word. Disgust, that was the spark. What came after was the fire that consumed everything. After that fleeting visit where Samuel appeared in front of my house, defeated with swollen eyes and no strength to invent another lie, I knew he had lost something much more important than a house. He had lost his father not physically, but emotionally, and that is not recovered with tears or promises. That night, I slept deeply, perhaps for the first time since it all began. I didn't dream of him, I didn't think about what I could have said. I just felt peace, the peace of having said enough. Weeks went by. Monica came more often. Ethan was already running around the garden as if it were his own, and I even hung a new hammock just for him. The neighbors greeted me by name. They invited me to give some talks at the Senior Cultural Center, and although I resisted at first, I ended up going. I told part of my story without giving names. Many men hugged me afterwards. One with tears in his eyes told me, "Thank you for saying what I don't dare to say." And I understood that the silence of old men is sometimes more of a scream than resignation. But when one decides to speak, others rise up with you. One Friday afternoon, with the cool breeze coming down from the hill, Monica told me that Samuel had gone to her house, that he was worse without a job, in debt, and that he had even tried to sell things from his apartment without the landlord's consent. They had threatened to report him. And there he was again, wallowing in his own disaster, looking for culprits outside without looking at what he had sown. "And what does he want now?" I asked her. "He says he needs help, that he can't do it alone." "And you believe him?" "No, Dad, not anymore, but he's my brother, and I am your father, and that's why I'm here with you." That dialogue resonated with me because I knew that at some point, Samuel would come back, not to truly apologize, but to look for a lifeline. And I was very clear that I would not be the one to give it to him, because there is something more valuable than lending a hand, knowing when not to. 3 days later, the inevitable happened. They knocked on the door just as I was finishing lunch. I approached cautiously. I wasn't expecting a visitor. I opened it, and there he was, Samuel. He wasn't carrying a suitcase, he wasn't carrying flowers, just his long face and broken voice. "Dad, I have nowhere to sleep tonight." I just looked at him. I leaned against the doorframe and said nothing. I lost everything. Everything. What you lost wasn't everything, Samuel. It was me. And that you lost that a long time ago. Are you going to be that harsh? After everything you did for me, now you leave me like this. It hurt me. Not because of his words, but because of his manipulation. Even in that state, he didn't understand. He didn't take responsibility. Do you know why I can't let you in, Samuel? Because you're not asking for forgiveness. You're asking for help, and they are not the same thing. What's the difference? Forgiveness is born from the soul, and help from self-interest. And you have no soul in this visit. I closed the door. Slowly, without violence. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from certainty, because that was the last time I saw him. After that, I didn't hear from him again. Monica told me he had left the city, that he tried to get a job in another state, that he was going around saying I was a bitter old man. I didn't care. I didn't want to know anymore. I focused on myself, on Ethan, on sunny Saturdays, on breakfasts with cornbread, on the books I had left unread for years. I started writing my memoirs, not with the idea of publishing them, but to leave them for my grandson, so that one day when he is grown, he will know who his grandfather was, what he did, what he did not allow, what he defended with dignity, Sometimes, as evening falls, I sit in the hammock with a cup of coffee. I listen to the birds, the wind, and I think about life, about how everything can be lost except dignity, and that although many do not understand, it is the only thing that makes us truly free. I don't know what will become of Samuel. I don't wish him any harm, but I don't expect him either. Because I learned that not all bonds can be saved. Some must be let go so that one does not sink with them. And I finally stopped sinking, because I chose to swim to shore alone but at peace. There is a type of loneliness that does not hurt. A chosen loneliness that is not imposed by abandonment, but by dignity. That was the one I chose. Not to punish anyone nor to play the victim, but to respect myself. Because after a lifetime of giving, the day comes when you also give something to yourself. Silence, peace, distance. And since I made the decision to walk away, it was as if the world finally turned down the volume. As if the noise that haunted me, the contempt, the humiliation, the manipulation remained on the other side of a door I never intended to open again. My days remained simple. I would wake up early, make my coffee, sweep the garden, and sit in the hammock to watch the sunrise. Sometimes I would write. Other times I would just stay there breathing, listening to the wind in the trees, watching the leaves fall one by one without hurry. Monica came every weekend. Sometimes she brought Ethan. Other times she came alone. She told me about her work, about how she was trying to start something on her own. She asked for my advice, laughed at my jokes, took care of me. She made me feel like a father again, but not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. One morning she arrived with a cardboard box. "Dad, I brought something I think you should have." "What is it?" "Your things that I found in the old house. They were stored in a closet mixed in with Samuel's papers. It seems you forgot them." I opened it with curiosity. There were old photos, notebooks, receipts, letters from when my wife was still alive. Also a cassette tape with my voice teaching Samuel the multiplication tables when he was 8 years old. I put it in a tape recorder I still had, and I heard my own voice saying, "Come on, son, you can do 9 times 7. And his little voice tiny answering with doubt. I broke down. I cried without making a sound, just with my eyes letting that memory pierce me. Because that boy, he did love me. That boy who repeated, "Thank you, Daddy," after every correct answer. He was the one who hugged me tight without shame, but that boy got lost somewhere along the way, and I didn't know when it happened. Monica watched me in silence, and when the recording finished, she approached slowly. "Do you regret anything, Dad?" "Yes, not having said enough sooner. For having put up with so much for fear of losing something that in the end no longer existed." She was lost in thought. Then she said something I will never forget. "I always admired you, Dad, but since you did what you did, since you had the courage to leave, I admire you more." Her words hugged me from the inside because I understood that I had not failed as a father, that I had failed perhaps as a silent man, that I had allowed more than I should have out of love, yes, but also out of habit, out of that idea that fathers must endure everything. And no, they shouldn't. Days later, I received a certified letter. It was from a lawyer. I was surprised. I thought there were no more legal matters pending, but when I opened it, I understood. It was a notice of lien. Samuel had used my name as a guarantee on a loan he never paid back. A forged signature, clearly. I was no longer listed as the owner of the house, but he had tried to use my old name on old documents. The bank had detected the irregularity and was now launching an investigation. They couldn't blame me, but they did ask for my cooperation. I immediately called the lawyer who had assisted me with the sale of the house. I told him everything. The next day, he filed a formal complaint for identity theft. We had proof signature comparisons, dates, notarized statements. Everything in order. I wasn't surprised. I already knew well what Samuel was capable of, but this time it hurt less because it no longer affected me personally. It was as if that chapter was so far away that its shadow could no longer reach me. What bothered me most was thinking about Ethan, about the father he had, about the example he was seeing. So I decided something. I called Monica and told her I wanted to open an education fund for the boy. I didn't put it in her name or even mine. I set it up with a special clause untouchable until he turned 18 with legal supervision and a designated financial guardian. I made sure that this boy, at least he would not repeat the story. What if Samuel finds out? Monica asked me. Let him find out. I don't owe him any explanations. I owe my grandson something better. She cried. She hugged me tightly. She said, "Thank you for not giving up, Dad." I gave up once when I thought all was lost. But now, no. Now I'm more alive than ever. That night I wrote a letter to Ethan. I kept it in a safe with the fund document. I told him who I was, what had happened, how a man can fall but can also get up. I told him I always loved him, that he was my hope in the midst of the shipwreck, and that I hoped that one day he could also be a dignified, just man, different from his father. Not with hatred, but with awareness. The following weeks were quiet. The lawyer informed me that Samuel did not show up to testify, that he was in another state, that he would probably face legal consequences. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad either. Because what happens when you play with fire is that sooner or later you get burned. And he long ago had lost control of the fire he had started. One afternoon while watering the garden, I saw Ethan ride by on his bike with a grin from ear to ear. He stopped in front of the gate and shouted, "Grandpa, I love you so much." I dropped the hose, walked over and replied, "And I love you too, son, more than you can imagine." And at that moment, I knew it was all worth it. Every tear, every silence, every difficult decision. Because what you sow with love, even if the road is full of stones, always ends up blooming. You just have to have the courage not to abandon the seed and the patience to wait for spring. There are silences that scream truths louder than any word. And at that point in my life, I no longer needed explanations or apologies. Because when you have been truly hurt, what you desire most is not for the other person to suffer, but for your own suffering to end. And that finally was happening. I had healed. Not with medicine, not with therapy. I healed with distance, with dignity, with the certainty that what I did was just. And above all, with the sincere love of those who did decide to stay. Like my daughter, like my grandson. My routine had become sacred. I would wake up early, read a little before breakfast, take slow walks around the neighborhood, greet the neighbors, sometimes help carry a bag, or just sit on a park bench to watch life go by. I discovered that you can start over even in your 80s if you stop expecting something from others and start listening to yourself. But one Sunday, when Monica didn't come as usual, I felt something strange, a restlessness in my chest. It wasn't anxiety. It was as if the air had become thick. I thought maybe she was sick. The next day she called me, "Dad, I need you to be calm about what I'm going to tell you." "Did something happen, Samuel?" "He's been arrested." I didn't say anything. "Why?" "He tried to forge a signature on a property document that no longer existed. The new owner of your old house reported him. They arrested him leaving a notary's office." "Is he in jail?" "Yes." "And you went to see him?" "I went, but they wouldn't let me in." He just asked me to let you know. I sat in silence by the window, watching an elderly couple walk by holding hands. I thought, at what point did everything break? When did my son become a stranger? Where was that boy who hugged me when he fell off his bike? What do you want me to do, Monica? Dad. I just wanted you to know. Not so you can save him, but so you can be at peace with your decision. I'm already at peace, sweetheart. For a long time now. Whatever happens with Samuel now, it's a consequence of his own actions. I know. Thanks for letting me know. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel joy, nor sadness, just a quiet resignation, like someone watching a storm in the distance but has already built a sturdy roof. That night, I couldn't sleep completely. I got up, went to my desk, and opened the notebook where I had been writing my memoirs. The last page was blank. I sat down and wrote. Sometimes the child you raised with the most care is the one who forgets you the most. But true love is not in those who demand from you, but in those who care for you without asking for anything in return. And that is the great lesson this life has taught me. The next day, I went to the market as always. I bought bread, tomatoes, coffee. I greeted the man at the vegetable stall, chatted with the lady at the flower shop. I walked back slowly, enjoying the sun. Life, despite everything, was still good to me. Maybe because I stopped forcing what wasn't meant for me. Maybe because finally I learned to choose myself. Monica visited me the next day. She brought cinnamon cookies and an envelope. Dad, he wrote this. I don't know if you want to read it. I left it on the table unopened. I'm in no hurry. Take your time. Did you read it? It's for you. We spent the afternoon together. Ethan was at a friend's house, so we talked without interruptions. She told me she was thinking of moving to a house closer to mine, that her job allowed her to. I told her not to do it for me. It's not for you, Dad. It's for me. I want Ethan to have you close, to grow up learning from you. I was moved because I understood that despite everything I lost with the other, I had gained everything. When they left, I was alone. The envelope was still there, untouched. I took it. I hesitated, but I opened it. Dad, I know you might not read this. And if you do, you might not believe anything I say. And you'd be right. I have no way to justify what I did, what I said, what I was. I failed you. I humiliated you. I made you a target for my anger. And worst of all, I never even stopped to ask if you were okay. I don't know at what point I became that man. I don't know when I drifted so far from you. Today, from this cold cell, all I can do is look back and understand that you were too good to me, that I never deserved so much, and that the disgust I spoke of wasn't for you. It was for me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say it. Samuel. I folded the letter. I put it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't break. Because I no longer needed that forgiveness to be at peace. My own I had already made. Not with him, but with myself. Because I understood that forgiving is not always about reconciling. Sometimes it's about letting go. Weeks passed. Monica told me that Samuel would remain in custody for a while, that he might face a trial, that she didn't want to get involved anymore. And me neither. I only asked her for one thing. If one day he truly changes, if one day he becomes a just man, give him a chance. But not for me, for himself. And you, I've already done my part. Over time, life wrapped me up in other things. Ethan started learning to play the guitar and would come to practice with me. Monica opened her small business and asked me to help her with the accounts. The neighborhood knew me as the grandfather who gives advice, and many would come to chat with me in the afternoons. Once a young mother told me, "Elias, how did you manage not to become bitter after everything?" And I replied, "Because I understood that there are things you can't change, but you can decide what to do with what's left." And that's what I did. With what was left, I built something new, smaller perhaps, but more true. And every night when I close my eyes, I give thanks in silence. Not for what I lost, but for what I learned. Because sometimes the most valuable thing is not what we are given, but what we discover when no one is left. And I finally had found myself. Life teaches you sooner or later that not everything that breaks can be fixed, but also that not everything that is lost is missed. And if you grow old without learning that you live with a backpack that never lets you walk straight. I thank God let go of many things in time. Not to forget, but to no longer carry what was not mine to carry. And so I arrived here, with a whole heart although with scars, with a straight back although I have endured many humiliations, with open hands. But no longer to give to those who despise, but to hold those who value. 2 years have passed since that day I heard Samuel say that I disgusted him. 2 years since I sold my house, disappeared, and left that note on the table. And in that time I haven't seen him again. I haven't received any more letters. I haven't heard his voice again. And not because I couldn't, but because I no longer wanted to. Because there are things that when they break are not fixed by talking. They are just accepted and let go. My life is different now. It's not one of luxury but of tranquility. The little house I rented at first ended up being mine. I bought it with part of the money from the sale in cash without telling anyone. I renovated it with my own hands little by little, just how I like it. I put up a wooden fence, a double hammock on the porch. I planted plants in the garden. There's a lemon tree that's starting to bear fruit. And every time I see it bloom, I remember a phrase I wrote in my notebook. Deep roots are not afraid of the wind. Ethan still visits me every week. He's 10 now. He's a curious, cheerful, respectful boy. He listens to me as if every word were a secret. And when I tell him stories of my youth, of his grandmother, of the times when everything was slower, but more sincere, he looks at me as if he were listening to a hero. And that honors me. It makes me feel useful again. Monica is also doing well. Her cake and pastry business is growing. And although she sometimes arrives tired, she always has time to sit with me for coffee and laugh about small things. She takes care of me without making it obvious. She helps me without making me feel old. And that, for a man my age, is worth gold. One day a few months ago, she asked me if I wanted to write a will. I said yes, but with one condition, that she not get involved, that she not know anything until I was gone, because I wanted to do it without pressure, without expectations. I drafted it calmly. I left a portion of the money for Ethan with the same clause as before. Access only from the age of 18 for educational purposes. I left the house for him as well, and a sealed envelope to be delivered only when he is old enough to understand. Inside is my notebook of memoirs with all my reflections, not for him to admire me, but for him to learn. So he knows that love also needs boundaries, and that dignity is never negotiated. As for Samuel, he is not in the will, not a dollar, not a word. Not for revenge, but for justice. Because one cannot reward the one who tramples, nor leave an inheritance to the one who despises. Sometimes loving a child is telling them this far. And that is also part of being a father. Recently I received an unexpected visit. It was Samuel's mother. We hadn't been a couple for many years. She had also been absent for most of the children's lives. She came looking for me not out of nostalgia, but because Samuel had written to her from where he now lives, a shelter in another state. According to her, he was alone without a steady job depending on social assistance, and he had started giving talks in emotional rehabilitation groups. I found it curious. I didn't ask much, I just listened. He says he's changed, Elias, that he finally understood. And you believe him? I don't know. But he asked me to come see you. And for what? To give you this. It was a folded piece of paper. I took it. But I didn't open it right then. I walked her to the door. She thanked me for my time. She hugged me without me asking her to, and she left. I waited until night. I sat in the hammock with the warm wind on my face, and I opened the paper. It was brief, very different from the previous letters. Dad, this time I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted to tell you that I understood. Late. But I understood. I became the man I swore I would never be. And the worst part, I was that way with you. Today I know that I no longer have a right to be in your life, that I don't deserve even a word. But I want you to know that everything you taught me finally caught up with me. Wherever you are, I wish you peace. And thank you, Samuel. I read it only once. I didn't feel the urge to keep it, nor to reply. I just folded it slowly. I left it on the table and continued to watch the stars. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is not to go back. It is to allow the other to find their own path alone, without you having to point anything out to them. And I had already given everything. And what I didn't give was because I learned that one also has the right to protect oneself. Today I look back and I don't regret it, because every decision I made was with a clear conscience. Because when I heard that cruel phrase, "My dad disgusts me," I didn't respond with hatred. I responded with action, and that made all the difference. I no longer have a big house or family dinners with everyone at the table. But I gained something else, a life of my own, a place where I'm not pointed at, where I'm not used, where I'm loved unconditionally, and that is more than many have. So if you're listening to this story and you feel on the verge of giving up, if you think there's no way out, if you think no one values you, I tell you this from the bottom of my soul, it's not too late. It's never too late to choose yourself, to lift your head, to say no more. Because sometimes the end is not a fall, it's a rebirth. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? And tell me also, from what corner of the world are you listening to this story? Because maybe I'm not the only father who chose to live with dignity, even if it was alone. And if you've made it this far, I thank you for listening to me. Because every word I told was with my heart in my hand. And if this story touched you, share it. Because who knows, maybe someone else needs to hear it. And now, thank you for being here.